Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you. I'm Tamiko Brown-Nagin, Dean of the Harvard Radcliffe Institute, and I'm pleased to welcome you to this year's Kim and Judy Davis Dean's Lecture in the Humanities, titled Audre Lorde, June Jordan, and a Homemade Field of Love. Before I introduce our speaker, let me take a moment to thank Kim and Judy Davis, whose support makes this lecture series possible. And I'm very glad to have Kim Davis here in the audience with us. Thank you, Kim, for your support. I'm also grateful to members of the Radcliffe Institute Leadership Society and all our annual donors. Your generosity keeps Radcliffe programming free and open to the public, and we thank you. Alexis Pauline Gumbs describes herself as, quote, a queer Black troublemaker and a Black feminist love evangelist and an aspirational cousin to all sentient beings. She holds a PhD from Duke University in English, African and African American Studies, and Women and Gender Studies. And she is the author of a trilogy of experimental poetic works, Spell, Scenes of Black Feminist Fugitivity, Archive, After the End of the World, and Dub, Finding Ceremony. Her most recent book, Undrowned, Black Feminist Lessons from Marine Mammals, received the 2022 Whiting Award for Nonfiction. The same queer Black feminist sensibility that animates her writing has made Alexis a committed activist and community builder. She is founder of Brilliance Remastered, a resource for academics which takes its motivation from Audre Lorde's assertion that, quote, the master's tools will never dismantle the master's house, and that this fact is only threatening to those who still define the master's house as their only source of support. She is also founding member of several other activist organizations, including Ubuntu, a women of color survivor-led coalition to end gendered violence, and the Mobile Homecoming Project, which she calls an experimental archive of Black queer brilliance. In her talk today, Alexis will explore how the work of Black feminist theorists can speak to our current climate crisis. According to a recent report issued by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, human-induced climate change is already having widespread and permanent impacts on a range of human and natural systems. Rising temperatures harm biodiversity, threatening the ecosystems and even the existence of thousands of animal species. As for humans, a growing body of evidence suggests that the consequences of global warming are likely to be experienced most acutely by vulnerable and marginalized communities. In the United States, for example, redlining and other discriminatory housing policies have meant that African Americans are 40% more likely than the rest of the population to live in the areas predicted to be at greatest risk of exposure to extreme heat and unhealthy air quality, according to a recent analysis by the EPA. On a global scale, researchers who study the relationship between gender and climate change have found that women in low and middle income nations are disproportionately impacted by rising global temperatures. Often, drought and other kinds of resource scarcity make it harder for these women to continue meeting basic household needs, a situation that in turn increases the likelihood of their being subjected to gender-based violence. The branch of feminist thought known as ecofeminism emerged as a part of the effort to grapple with these links between environmental issues such as climate change and the various forms of inequality that already exist in our world. Ecofeminism, in the words of influential theorist Greta Gard, proceeds from the premise that the ideology which authorizes oppressions, such as those based on race, class, and gender, sexuality, and physical disabilities, is the same ideology which sanctions the oppression of nature. The ecofeminist strands in Alexis's work are apparent in the analogies she draws between the ways that women of color have built community and demonstrated resilience under inhospitable circumstances, and the ways that whales, dolphins, and other marine mammals have done so. In Undrowned, she observes that, like mammals who live primarily in the water, quote, we're often navigating contexts that seem impossible for us to breathe in, and yet we must. She gives an elegy for a species of sirenian, or sea cow, discovered by Europeans in the 18th century and then rapidly hunted to extinction, writing, quote, so she knows that what we know, it is dangerous to be discovered. In Alexis's talk this afternoon, she will bring her eco-feminist perspective to bear on the work of two major Black feminist writers, Audre Lorde and June Jordan, the latter of whose papers are housed here at Radcliffe in the Schlesinger Library on the history of women in America. We are so honored to have Alexis with us today. After her remarks, Alexis will be joined in conversation by my colleague, Terry Tempest Williams, who is writer-in-residence at Harvard Divinity School. Terry is the author of numerous books, including the classic work of environmental literature, Refuge, An Unnatural History of Family and Place, and more recently, The Hour of Land, a personal topography of America's natural parks. Following Alexis and Terry's conversation, we'll open the floor to questions. Whether you're watching us in person or online, you can submit your questions at any time using the Slido link that's provided on the screen behind me and posted in the chat feature of the Zoom webinar. I'm thrilled to have both Alexis and Terry with us today. And now please join me in warmly welcoming Alexis Pauline Gumbs to the stage.
You're so beautiful. I'm sure you're beautiful on the live stream too, everyone who's tuning in. I want to invite you to join me in taking a few breaths. And some of you are already doing it. See what posture best supports you, your breathing. Maybe having both feet on the ground. Maybe there's like an area you want to stretch. And I am going to take 6 breaths. So I'm going to mark my inhale and my exhale. You can breathe along with me if that's a useful prompt for you, or you can breathe at your own pace. Here we go. Inhaling and exhaling. 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 One more time, maybe even louder. Inhaling. And a big exhale. Thank you for breathing with me. And I'm dedicating my participation here to my grandmother, Lydia Gumbs. She did not know the term ecofeminist, but she absolutely practiced it in solidarity with other women all over the world. And like I've been telling everyone that I found a yearbook picture of her when she was 16 that I had never seen before, and that it doesn't seem like anyone in my family had seen, and I am just re-obsessed. And I know that I'm not the only one who comes here with the love and support and life-making decisions of people who are not in this room, or live stream folks, people who are not in whatever space you're listening or watching from. And so I want to just take 1 minute and ask you to think of one of those folks. They can be living now, they can be an ancestor like my grandmother Lydia is now, they can be older than you, they can be younger than you, they can be of any species. But if you would just turn to a neighbor and let them know who you're dedicating to, you can say a little bit about why, or you can remain mysterious. But let's do it right now. Ready, go. Okay, so please thank your partner. Maybe create a to be continued plan to stay in touch and continue. But I'm going to continue. I would like to open with some words that the great Black feminist poet June Jordan wrote to the great Black feminist poet Audre Lorde after Audre Lorde had been dead for about 6 months. Here are the first words of her tribute. I will always remember our first meeting back in the 60s when both of us went into double overtime fighting for open admissions at City College and teaching our free university classes in Harlem's strangely windowless new school called IS 201. We were surrounded by revolutionary comrades and revolutionary students, and we thought we could change public education in this country. And we did. We won. The students won. I open tonight with these words to remind you, or to let you know for the first time, that Audre Lorde and June Jordan, who are the twin ancestor guides of tonight's conversation and also the poet guides of my life, met each other supporting direct action protests by students who created 24-hour occupations of their campus. Yes, at City College. Audre Lorde, June Jordan, and some of their writer-professor colleagues, Toni Cade Bambara, Adrienne Rich, brought blankets and food and held workshops and teach-ins in full support of their students' demand for their university to choose love and radical inclusion over racism in the form of structural, curricular, and personnel changes, and most importantly, the principle of open admissions for their publicly funded school to the students and potential students of their city. In the meantime, they changed the flags on their campus, lifting a Pan-African liberation flag and the Puerto Rican flag to symbolize both their solidarity with the Pan-African anti-colonial movements and the Puerto Rican nationalist movement, and to serve as a focal point for what Jordan calls Free University, and which they also called Harlem University, in the time between the university's eventual evolution. It didn't take that long, but yes, eventual evolution by the end of the semester. In those actions, they were embodying what the students who participated in the Mississippi Freedom Summer witnessed, when their mentors, including Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker, created the Freedom Democratic Party, an alternative to a Democratic Party that was not brave enough to serve all of its constituents and therefore de facto condoned state-sanctioned apartheid in its southern precincts. All of this is to say that based on my decades of study of Audre Lorde and June Jordan and their public vocal support for the Palestinian freedom movement, I can say confidently that they would be in full support of the students participating in peaceful direct action protests here and across the world, and in full support of the faculty and staff who are supporting, protecting, and sometimes feeding them and offering supplies. It is clear to me that they would support the student movement for this and other universities to divest from this unjust war and to stop the genocide of the Palestinian people that this institution and the United States government as a whole is funding, arming, and enabling. And in their lineage, and from my own heart, I want to make it clear that I myself am raising my voice in support of a free Palestine in my lifetime and divestment right now. And I'm here today to share from my research about Audre Lorde and June Jordan artifacts and information that I think can be helpful in that cause and the larger cause of peace on earth and the movement of our species into an ethical relationship with this planet as this planet. Their support, Max, I'm gonna need extra time because of the loving applause of our family that's gathered here. Their support of student activists and their ethical choice to risk their jobs by supporting their students formed the foundation of Audre Lorde and June Jordan's relationship and taught them what they needed to know about each other's ethics, accountability, and the dedication of their work. Let me move back to a moment when Audre Lorde was still alive, March 1977. March 22nd, 1977, when Audre Lorde became the first Black poet featured with a solo reading by the Academy of American Poets, and June Jordan introduced her from the stage. That day at the Donnell Library, Audre was nervous as she prepared to take the podium. June Jordan walked onto the stage first. She said, "I feel delighted and privileged to introduce you to the poet Audre Lorde, my friend and sister whom I love and hold very dear." She went back again to the origin story of their sisterhood. She showed up, as most teachers did not, to keep the faith with the Black Sikh students. The generous integrity of my sister Audre Lorde impressed me then as I will not forget. Sikh, an acronym for Search for Education, Elevation, and Knowledge, a program that is still in existence at CUNY, was created in order to address educational inequities of the New York City public school system. Initially designed to offer remedial classes to CUNY students from underperforming high schools, the faculty, including, as I mentioned before, revolutionary writers, including Toni Cade Bambara, Adrienne Rich, June Jordan, and Audre Lorde, practiced a pedagogy that positioned their students to change the meaning of education instead of simply becoming assimilated into its norms. This was the decolonial danger of honoring what the students were seeking, which was not simply increased social capital in an existing system, but a field of possibility that honored the communities they loved at home and were inspired by all over the world. As such, the elevation in Sikh became for these students not simply an upgrade to their individual status, but an ethical sea change in the impact of educational institutions. Speaking of institutions, June Jordan went on to point out that while the Academy of American Poets was remiss to be offering their first reading to a Black poet so late in history, Audre Lorde was the best choice. She said, there could not be a more signal poet than Audre Lorde. She explained the importance of Audre Lorde's poetry on its own term. Audre Lorde eviscerates. She sears away the layers of hypocrisy, Audre Lorde devises an imagery that illumines the whole force of moral feeling. Her work is poetry to be used, to be guided by, to be changed by deeply. This compliment was probably the reason that Audre Lorde's daughter Elizabeth asked June Jordan if she could give her mother Jordan's copy of that introduction, which June Jordan signed on the spot, "For Audre with my love." This description of Audre's poetry so matched her own intention for her poetry that she wrote and revised, and y'all, this is like, did you see it in the pop-up? It's like really the only like badly typed letter from Audre Lorde that I've seen in all my archival looking. There was nervousness, and she has her excuse. She's on an unfamiliar typewriter. But she thanks June Jordan for the gift of, quote, "what we all long for, a sister who says, yes, I see you, my sister, and can use what I feel." But this was not even the biggest compliment of the introduction. Jordan closed her remarks with the highest compliment she could give. Speaking just days after Fannie Lou Hamer died, far too young, of breast cancer, June Jordan invoked her mentor from the stage. She called Hamer a great Black woman of indomitable righteous courage and love, who was, quote, "in many ways, my mother." She noted that though she mourned Hamer's death, she also rejoiced that there were women in Hamer's lineage, quote, "extraordinary woman beings who yet lived and breathed in community." Audre Lorde is one of those women, she declared. And now I arrive back at the place where other circumstances I might have started. What does it mean to be in the lineage of Fannie Lou Hamer? And actually, if you all could show the image, there they are. So this is Fannie Lou Hamer and Ella Baker. I'm aware that though I've already mentioned Fannie Lou Hamer multiple times, and though in fact everyone within the sound of my voice has been impacted by the life of Fannie Lou Hamer, some people here on the live stream may be learning about Fannie Lou Hamer for the first time. And there is no better introduction to Fannie Lou Hamer than June Jordan's 1977 poem, "Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer." I am going to read it to you now. This was published in the New York Times on June 3rd, 1977. Mrs. Fannie Lou Hamer in Memoriam by June Jordan. You used to say, "June, honey, when you come down here, you're supposed to stay with me. Where else?" Meaning home, against the beer, the shotguns, and the point of view of white men don't never see Black anybody's without some violent itch start up. The one who said no N-words voting in this town. It doesn't say N-word, but my Nana knows how to use live stream, so I'm gonna say no N-words voting in this town, lest it be feet first to the booth. Then jailed you, beat you brutal, bloody, battered, beat you blue beyond the feeling of the terrible, and failed to stop you. Only God could, but he wouldn't stop you. Fortress from self-pity, humble as a woman anywhere, I remember finding you inside the laundromat in Ruleville, lion spine relaxed. Hell, what's the point to courage when you washing clothes? But that took courage, just to sit there, target to the killers looking for your singing face, perspiry through the rinse and spin. And later, you stood mighty in the door on James Street, loud, calling, "Bullets or no bullets, the food is cooked and getting cold." We ate, a family tremulous but fortified by turnips, okras, hand-picked like the lilies, full to the very living, full. One solid gospel sanctified, one gospel peace, one full Black lily luminescent in a homemade field of love. That's where the title comes from. Okay. That's Fannie Lou Hamer from Sunflower County. Sunflower County, Mississippi is named after its water source, the Sunflower River. The Sunflower River, new name for the old highway of the Houma, Grigia, Natchez, identified by the nutritious yellow flowers that grow alongside it. But in the time of Fannie Lou Hamer, Sunflower County was a precinct of starvation. This is what Fannie Lou Hamer knew long before she got her honorary degree from Tougaloo College, where, by the way, Audre Lorde was a National Endowment of the Arts poet in residence, just so you know. What Fannie Lou Hamer already knew was that if you colonize the land, insist on extraction, steal the labor, well, first steal the people to do the labor, and then keep stealing the labor in the time of so-called freedom. That is to say, if you insist on a white supremacist manufacture of cotton, I mean a monoculture, if you insist that the blackest soil in America must produce soft whiteness, it's a hard thing to do when the river wants sunflowers. It's a hard thing to do when the people, if given their choice, would grow not something white, but something beautiful, not cotton, but something edible. If the people, given their choice, would grow food, it becomes important to the monoculture that people have no choice. To impose a monoculture where life would otherwise love itself and grow unpredictable as love all along the river highway, you would have to tear the people who the land first loved away from that land. Genocide and displacement in the service of a monoculture, cotton. And the people who occupy the land, they have to love what they can't eat. So you have to convince some people that they are white, which should mean they can't afford a choice. And so the poor white farmers of Mississippi receive the protection of whiteness instead of a choice. They have to love the idea of whiteness more than they love themselves. This is what we call a monoculture. Repress all seed memories from multiple migrations. Teach the people to act like individuals, sell each other out, hush the divine whispers of your soul, starve for a whiteness that can only grow in the soil of Black death, a hard thing to maintain, fields and generations and bushels of heavy white softness. And therefore, under no circumstances can the Black labor force, Black lifeblood, working Black soil have a choice, because without any illusions about the reality that whiteness equals death, they would never choose the extractive leach of cotton if given a choice, and this is why they must not have a choice. They would choose something they could eat. Under no circumstances should Black people exercise choice in the state of Mississippi. This is why, when Fannie Lou Hamer went to register to vote, they shot bullets in the window next to her soft pillow. This is why, when she went to Winona to try to register again as part of a group, they beat her until, she says, her body felt like metal. I don't know if you all saw in the pop-up the notebook page where June Jordan only wrote Fannie Lou Hamer and beat in a Winona jail, and then the rest of the page is blank. I'm thinking about that page. It's a hard line to maintain a monoculture amidst the love of brave and hungry people. A homemade field of love. And that's what I'm seeking to theorize. This is what my next book is about. So my next book is my biography of Audre Lorde, which comes out on August 20th. It's called Survival is a Promise, The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde. And if you're attention diverse, I guess you could pre-order it right now. But this next piece is about climate change and June Jordan. And at first I thought what I was seeking to find through Black feminists was something like a unified field theory of love. I'm guided by June Jordan's words about her mentor that you just heard, one full Black lily in a homemade field of love, which is quite a way to describe the land and the people currently referred to as the state of Mississippi, by the way. And I'm also guided by June Jordan's words in her essay, The Creative Spirit, which we had the honor of publishing in our anthology, Revolutionary Mothering, where she says, love is life force, and then goes on to describe the uncanny coordination of fields of tiger lilies across geographical space. So anyway, if any of you are a botanist, focusing on lilies, get at me, also if you're a physicist, because following the poet Samia Bashir, a student of June Jordan's Poetry for the People program at Berkeley, in Bashir's book, Field Theories, I'm wondering what a field is. Epistemologically, what a field is, since Lorde and Jordan and Bambara and their colleagues, Adrienne Rich, Sonia Sanchez, Barbara Smith, etc., were founding figures in the academic fields of my own possibility, Black studies, ethnic studies more broadly, and women and gender studies, but also environmentally what a field is. This is the part where I try to tell you what I haven't figured out yet. Because the fields of wildflowers that June Jordan saw when she first went to write about Mississippi for what would become her 1970 New York Times article, Mississippi, Black Home. Or the fields she stood in at Fannie Lou Hamer's Freedom Farm Cooperative, scribbling in her notebooks, which are over there, about the poetics of the flowers that grow out of the squash plants and the okra plants, make me think that maybe the word unified in the phrase unified field theory of love is not only redundant, because what is love if it does not connect all to all, but also misleading in the context of a monoculture, because Fannie Lou Hamer, the freedom fighter who became a freedom farmer to feed the people, was not changing her mission when she moved from voter registration to freedom farming. It was, in fact, the organic outgrowth of the Mississippi Freedom Democratic Party, the obvious unsustainability of a monoculture, an extractive monoculture, which might be an agricultural name for fascism. Come talk to me if you're a political scientist or an agronomist. Which is to say, I hope you hear me, because actually, I think I've said it a few times, the civil rights movement was already an environmental justice movement, which is to say, free the land, which is what they're still saying in Jackson, Mississippi. I don't know where Christian is. I know there's at least one person from Jackson, Mississippi here, where in 1970, you can listen to this on the audio that Schlesinger has made available on their website. You can listen to June Jordan listening to students recounting their experience of what? A violent police response to students on their own campus protesting for peace. So here we are again. For those who don't remember, police wounded 12 students and killed a law student and a high school student who were protesting against the invasion of Cambodia in the Vietnam War. And so here we are again. I really was about to just come talk about physics and flowers and freedom with Terry, but it is urgent that I say, on this campus where as of yet the university administration has not brought the local police in, unlike my own alma mater, Barnard College at Columbia University, also June Jordan's alma mater, and unlike the campus next to my high school, Emory University in Atlanta, Georgia, and unlike the campus down the street from us at Chapel Hill, where this morning the police removed protesters, and unlike the administration of Northeastern University just down the street, I must say that it is urgent for this community to protect each other, to protect the student protesters. You can call it whatever you want. For example, in the early 1980s, when June Jordan created the Moving Towards Home poetry reading through PEN America to raise money for injured Palestinian and Lebanese children, and the organization of PEN itself turned against her. And after she read her poem at the end of the reading, her poem Moving Towards Home, where she says, "I was born a Black woman, but now I must become a Palestinian," white men surrounded her and threatened her life, saying she should be burned alive. June Jordan remembers the names of the women who stood with her. She pointed out that those brave women were in the lineage of Fannie Lou Hamer. The Black feminist poet Alexis DeVoe, also first biographer of Audre Lorde, Alexis DeVoe, the white Jewish poet Kathy Engel, the Lebanese poet Etel Adnan, the founder of the Arab American Feminist League, Carol Haddad, in her essay, Life After Lebanon, where she also recounts being blacklisted from the New York Times You heard me mention the New York Times twice. June Jordan was a frequent writer for the New York Times until this particular moment. She describes the women who were her force field as the presence of Fannie Lou Hamer. And you know what Fannie Lou Hamer said. Just pretend like you already know. And then just remember from now on, nobody's free until everybody's free. Which means that everyone has the potential to join us in the lineage of Fannie Lou Hamer. June Jordan especially celebrated the Israeli peace activists who she felt were in the lineage of Fannie Lou Hamer and also the model for how to protest when you are part of a settler colonial state, which I am, which June Jordan was, which many of us are here in the United States. So, I'm urging you, the community gathered here today, to protect the Harvard students, the Northeastern students, the MIT students, the Tufts students, the students from wherever you drove in from. Create a force field around them with your witness. Offer them whatever you learned in your bravest moments. Follow their lead and demand an end to the genocide in Gaza, which threatens not only the extinction of a people, but also of the birds, the plants, the shoreline poisoned with phosphorus even as we speak. Because this is what our planet requires us to tap into. A homemade field of love. Thank you. Did I accidentally press a button? No, I didn't. Okay, good.
Hello, my friend. It's so good to see you.
Thank you so much.
And to the audience, this is such a powerful occasion, and it's such an honor to be here in conversation with you. And thank you to the Radcliffe Institute for making this force field of love for you. Thank you for your voice, for your devotional voice, for your love of these women, that you were in the lineage of Fannie Lou Hamer, June Jordan, Audre Lorde. And in your spirit of bringing us to this moment off script, I stand in solidarity with you and with our students here at Harvard. And as I was saying to Alexa last night in email, walking through Harvard Yard and honoring so many of our students, I was struck last night by how peaceful and how serene and how brave they were. Mm-hmm. And to all of our students, I think it's exactly what they should be doing. And we, in supporting them in the name of peace, thank you for what you've brought to us. And in the spirit of the moment, I'm wondering, and we didn't talk about this, but if maybe you and I could read line by line June Jordan's poem, Intifada, Incantation. I've got it right here.
I was like, you know I have one in here. Okay.
I said I loved you and I wanted.
Genocide to stop.
I said I loved you and I wanted affirmative
Action and reaction.
I said I loved you and I wanted music.
Out the windows.
I said I loved you and I wanted.
Nobody thirst and nobody
cold.
I said I loved you and I wanted.
Justice under my nose.
I said I loved you and I wanted.
Boundaries to disappear.
I wanted.
Nobody rock back the trees.
I wanted.
Nobody take away daybreak.
I wanted.
Nobody freeze all the people on their
knees.
I wanted you.
I wanted your kiss on the skin of my soul.
And now you say you love me and I stand.
Despite the trillion treacheries of sand.
You say you love me and I hold the longing.
Of the winter in my hand.
You say you love me and I commit.
To friction and the undertaking
of the pearl.
You say you love me.
You say you love me.
And I have begun.
I begin to believe maybe.
Maybe you do.
I am tasting myself.
In the mouth of the sun. June Jordan forever.
In your new poetic biography, Survival is a Promise, The Eternal Life of Audre Lorde, and I can tell you, I finished it last night, and I can't wait to reread it again slowly. It is so beautiful. It is so beautiful.
I have to say, Terry is one of the only people who's read it. There's one other person in here who's read it, my partner, Shanko Dare, but thank you for reading it so fast.
I can't wait to read it again. You talk about how Audre needed a new story, and this quote of hers stuck with me. The community you have is the community you create. And you have created a community of poetic ancestors, now eternal sisters, with whom it is clear you stand in a circle of relationships, and you invite all of us in with you. Can you talk to us about your approach to archival research and how you have animated their personal histories, Audre Lorde in particular, through bits and pieces of paper fragments, recordings and journal entries into present-day oracles? And I love how you talk about Audre Lorde's work as, quote, a black archive of buried photosynthesis. So I hear you speak about archive as soil, soul, ancestral work. Can you talk to us about that?
Yes, I can. First of all, I also just want to thank you so much, Terry, for being here with me right now and for being with me a long time before I met you. I actually found you the same place that I found Audre Lorde, which is Karis Books and More, feminist bookstore in Atlanta, Georgia. Some people love Karis, the oldest, still lasting feminist bookstore in North America. And I was in their Young Women's Writers Group when I was 14, and Linda Bryant, beloved mentor, person who facilitated that program for us, was the person who first gifted me with your work right when I needed it. And that was also the room, which doubled as a supply closet, where I saw Audre Lorde's Sister Outsider and her collected poems stacked up, and I have never been the same. So I just want to, when I time travel back to that moment, Audre is there and you are there. I really appreciate you being with me in this moment. Yes, so the archive. So across the street from that bookstore is Emory University. And that's probably the second place. The first place I did primary research was the Auburn Avenue Research Library in Atlanta. And it was really wandering through. They had an exhibit a little bit more permanent than the archival pop-up that we have here in this building, but they had this exhibit on Black print culture. And I just remember being like, what is this? And what is this place? And this is the type of nerd I was. I started just voluntarily doing archival research as a child when I could have been doing other things. But it was my time travel, you know, and it was a space where I wouldn't have been able to articulate it the beautiful way that you said it then, but I needed a community of presence and of witness and of bravery to be with me as tokenized Black kid, not quite knowing I was also a queer kid at a majority white high school down the street from this is all happening in the same place. And so I'll say that that's where it started. I understood that it was time travel. And then there was, honestly, the turning point. There's so many turning points, I guess, but there's a turning point for me when my grandmother Lydia, who I dedicated to, when she passed away, she was the first person who I knew who passed away, who I knew I needed to stay in conversation with. I knew that the conversation could not end simply because of death. And so I started to write poems to her. I started to listen to poems from her. I would, as I am and as I always do, would wear her jewelry, would look in her mirrors, would look at her passport photos. That's why I'm tripping with finding this yearbook photo that I hadn't somehow never been able to find until now. And I think that listening opened a portal, because then I went back to the archive and I started listening differently. So when I came here and worked with June Jordan's papers, and when I went to Spelman and worked with Audre Lorde's papers, I was listening for them, I feel like with an opening in my consciousness that I had opened to let my grandmother in and to stay in communication with her, but I was using that same valence of listening to really listen to my assignment from Audre Lorde and from June Jordan and from Lucille Clifton, and those are some of the first people whose I don't even know what to say, who I completely surrendered myself to in that way.
You know, you talked about how when you held Audre Lorde's journals, that you made decisions that you are still trying to catch up with. Would you mind sharing what that, I know that's a really personal thing, but I'm wondering if you'd be willing to share what were those decisions in that moment of listening?
There are many. I mean, one of them is even happening right now, of speaking the truth of my heart, even when I'm terrified to, and don't know how people will respond. Also my decision to prioritize my work as a community accountable scholar over institutional relationships comes from really seeing, like really in Audre Lorde's journals, what she went through. And I am still growing into that. I think many of my relationship with Audre Lorde is a lifelong relationship, of course, and it's a challenging relationship, because when you commit to people who were so rigorous with themselves, it's not easy. You know, like you can't, I mean, look at how June Jordan's looking at us. This is my everyday. And not to say I'm even living up to it, but you know, that's what I mean by saying I'm still growing into that.
I mean, just reading your book and going back to the source of Poetry is Not a Luxury and her essay on silence, I realized how soft I had become, because I remember reading those early on and rereading them, but I have lost track of them, and they are right back. I feel like I'm right back in their jaws, you know, of commitment. And I mean, just those phrases, you know, my silence did not protect me. Your silence will not protect you. And what that means, especially at this moment in time. And what is at risk, which is free speech, which is everything. I'm curious about, you know, we hear about the liberation aspects of these powerful women, whether it's I guess what I'm saying is what we don't hear and what you are bringing to us now at this moment in time is their ecological rigor, and how their voice for the earth is a voice for the female body, the Black body, and all of our bodies as human beings. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, one of the reasons why I hope you guys read this biography I wrote is not just because I'm under assignment to, you know, spread the words of Audre Lorde everywhere, but because I feel like people really don't know the ecological aspect of her work is one of the most important aspects of it for us in this very moment, and I don't feel that it's the aspect, even people who know about Audre Lorde may not be aware of the fact that she was thinking ecologically from her childhood, like the same age I was where I voluntarily started doing archival research. She was aware of the fact that she lived down the street from where the atom bomb was created, and she was constantly reading science fiction. Her first published essay is an essay about science fiction in 17 magazine. It's so good, so good. And she therefore became a scientist. So this is why I was like, if you're a physicist, I read so much geology and geochemistry and goodness, way outside of anything that I would feel was my field of expertise, because Audre Lorde studied these fields. She was really interested in what it meant to be a part of the earth in the atomic age, when, as she quotes her father as saying, humanity can now destroy itself. And so I think about how we think about people who are the age that Audre was then, now, feeling the climate grief that they're feeling, being able to see in real time tragedies and violence happening all over the world and how overwhelming that is. And I think about Audre Lorde and June Jordan, 2 years apart in age, being in this generation that really saw humans become a species that could destroy everything and said that it would. Whose lives were preceded by and shaped by world wars, who lived in a context where the decision makers in their lives were all people traumatized by those wars. And we have so much to learn from the young people they were before they articulated themselves as Black feminists and as thinkers in the way that we've been able to consume their work. And so part of my responsibility is to bring that aspect to us and to that generation who are the age that they were then.
The thing that just blew my mind, the image, maybe the seminal image of your biography of Audre Lorde, is how she was working with crystals. Mm-hmm. You know, with radio, with wavelengths, and that the workload was so heavy that she would put those crystals in her mouth. Mm-hmm. I just think of Audre Lorde with crystals in her mouth. And you also write about the shape of their influence, and you equate her with hurricanes, you know, because she was from St. Croix lived there for a bit. And I think that idea of to equate someone with the shape of their influence when it's so much invisibility. Mm-hmm. Those two images, can you play with those with us?
Yeah, so there's so much. So Audre Lorde was a geologist in her own, a self-taught geologist, a collector of stones, a person who had this incredible stone collection in her living room. She'd be the type of person who you'd come over. I wish I had been one of the people to come over, but the people I interviewed got to go over to her house, and she'd be like, look at this stone that I found, and it's called this, or, you know, she's being interviewed, and I love listening to recordings when she's being interviewed, and then she suddenly slows down, and she's like, what's that stone in your ring, you know? And then the interviewer's like, wait, what? She was always looking for that. But what Terry is talking about is the fact that when she was trying to earn money to be able to continue her education, she worked in this factory in Connecticut that processed crystals. So it processed quartz, the crystals that make like a watch tick, and that are used for radios and now heart monitors and everything that functions through a crystal, which is so much. And she feels that might have been, one, they had to rinse it in this toxic tetrachloride. Anybody who's doing liver research, tetrachloride is like what destroys the liver. Audre Lorde's cancer metastasized to her liver, and she wondered, because now basically the liver medication that you want to invent is whatever does the opposite of what carbon tetrachloride does. That was what the crystals were rinsed in, and she was in a position where she would get paid by the amount of crystals that she produced. And so she would like put them in her mouth and like spit them out in the toilet so that her count would be higher, so that she could like cheat the system. She also didn't keep the hood down on this radiation machine that she was using to process the crystals. And these are some of the, this is some of what happens, right? When you're underpaid, when the factory treats people as disposable labor.
And also that amplification.
And I think about like the radioactivity, exactly. Right? And I think about her working with signals. And because she loves science fiction, there's this particular chapter, y'all, there's 58 chapters, so just choose one. If you read one, I'm happy. But there's one that takes a science fiction mode about like, this is how Audre Lorde turned into a being who could signal across generations, right? That this exploited labor, this period of her life where she was working, part of the reason she was working more was because she also wanted to raise money and be able to study abroad, but also because she was afraid of McCarthyism in the United States and wanted to leave, but also because she was avoiding her dad, who was actually dying, and she wasn't ready to deal with it. All of this is happening, and she's in this factory, and she has these crystals in her mouth. And so in that chapter, which is like, what's the science fiction version, she eventually gets fired because she's breaking all these rules that I just mentioned. She returns from Connecticut to New York City radioactive. And that means something in terms of the ticking clock of the quartz particles that she had to have swallowed, because you never really spit anything out completely. But also her radio signals were active in a particular way that she then manifests through the rest of her life. Aren't you guys curious about this biography? I realize as I'm talking to it, I'm like, this doesn't even sound like, but it's gonna make sense when you read it.
Speaking of radiance, because of that image of radioactivity, you have a radiance. You are a person of presence. When you speak, there is a quality of not only oration, but oracles. The last question I would ask you, and we could speak for hours, and I long for that. And again, forgive the personal aspects of it, but your writing is personal. Can you share with us your spiritual practice and how that is in alignment with your work to create a whole, even holy planet, and your writing?
Oh, there's so much. There's so much. My spiritual practice, I mean, you heard some of it, right? I'm listening to dead people, evidently, because Grandma, I have to keep listening to her. So now the door is open. But the interesting thing is that when I was first reading your work, and part of the reason that Linda gave me your work, in particular in Unspoken Hunger, was because at the time my family was part of the Mormon Church, which I'm not going to say a lot about, but it's a colonial institution. I could say that. And
I can echo that.
and though it's a practice where they do ceremony for dead people with their own bodies. And that still resonates with me, that part, but not the way of doing it without people's consent. And anyway, so I said that because I'm in the lineage of Audre Lorde and June Jordan. But I didn't think about that connection until recently, the fact that I am listening and I am in the practice of making myself open so that an older love can flow through me to you. That's really the assignment. And so, over the years, it's become a multi-species assignment. It's become more expansive than I would have imagined. But my actual practices then require, or at least consist of, many forms. I like to wake up when it's dark. I meditate in like 6, 7 different ways, which now includes seated meditation, but also includes staring at myself in the mirror, listening to a love song. Not like a love song, like one particular love song, but a love song, or at least a song with loving energy in it. And it includes dancing and really trying to listen for what my body's trying to move energetically. It includes the first part of my writing practice, which is an ancestral listening, and which is very open. I think it's in a kinship with Lucille Clifton's listening in her writing, listening for her mother and then listening for other ancestors as time went on. Those are the things that come first. And it's all in the service of just the possibility of being present, being able to really, I look in the mirror for that, however long the song is, 5 minutes, 7 minutes, in the hopes that I won't project whatever I'm not trying to see about myself onto you later that day. That's the hope. I think it's helping. I wouldn't say it's foolproof, but I think it's helping. All of that is just because I want to listen better, and there's a lot of clearing. Mm-hmm. And now that I actually am practicing sitting meditation, like just sitting there as a person who I already said I'm attention diverse, and I'm a recovering workaholic, and I'm just sitting there, it's amazing what goes on in my mind. It's so interesting to just notice the randomness that seems so unrelated, and I'm like, whoa, there's so much there. And it's not that I want to vanquish my thought process or any aspect of that, it's just that I want to just keep opening the way. And these are my guides.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I think of the poet Aja Monet, when she says the assignment of the artist is to love, is to love, is to love,
right.
is to love. And you certainly have embraced that assignment. And I just want to express my love to you as a sister.
And I love you too. And I love you all too. Thank you so much.
We are now going to transition to what's in your minds, and we are going to take some questions from the audience. What inspires you to start or accept projects, invitations, and what inspires you to say no? It's a great question.
Great question. You know, when part of the reason I went to Barnard is because June Jordan went to Barnard, by the way. And I used to have on my wall this quote from June Jordan where she said, "Though the world forgets me, I will say yes and no." Because I lean into the yes. And it's taken me a long time for the no to become more accessible to me and more clear to me as really another way to protect that yes, that is that larger assignment. Which is to say, sometimes I have to sit still, sometimes I have to pray. Oftentimes that form of prayer is asking my partner, who's really great at saying no to everything anyone ever asks me to do. Because like, aren't you already doing enough? And I'm like, yeah. But, so it's helpful to have somebody who loves me and wants me to be balanced and well, to talk to about these things. Sometimes I feel like I'm listening for what they would want. I mean, to be honest, this is a great honor, and it's wonderful to be able to talk with you, but it's really because of June Jordan that I said yes. And it's important to me that her archives are here. It's important to me to shine a light on that. And even though I know I could never replace her or say what she would actually say in this moment, and in fact, I'll say, like, Harvard may be lucky that it's me and not June Jordan actually here saying what June Jordan would say in this moment, even though I'm trying to be true to it. That's why I said yes to this. And sometimes it's that, you know, so it does have to feel connected in a meaningful way because there's only so many things you can do, and I'm excited to, you know, get back to writing this, but also the great Aurora Levins-Morales told me something so helpful and pragmatic, which is that there's also certain times in the writing cycle when sharing is helpful. So it's helpful for me to share some of what I shared when I'm in the process of, like, how am I articulating this idea of a field, for example? And what does it feel like to say that out loud? And how are y'all looking at me when I say this, you know, as I'm in my own process as a way of feedback? So for whoever's asking this question, sometimes that can be useful too. Like, am I in the time where I need to actually just be by myself, or I need to, as I have for many years, never come into this building and only gone into the archive, and just be there and sit and be listening and listening and listening? Or is this part of the time where it will be helpful to start sharing with you?
Another question that has to do with listening. A member of the audience wants to know, in pragmatic ways, for those of us who may not know how to connect with our ancestors, do you have some advice for them?
Listen, I am not certified in any way to tell you how to do this, but I think for me, it's definitely been an experimental process, an intuitive process. I spoke a little bit about when my grandmother passed away, I started really holding her jewelry close. For some reason, surfaces like mirrors and glasses and her purses, her passports were the things I wanted to hold really close. And in the archive, you are also touching the things that, if the person has passed away already, that an ancestor has touched. We don't always have access to that. I don't have access to objects that all of my ancestors have held, and that can be part of a history of violent displacement, that we don't have huge family archives all the time where we can actually hold those things. So sometimes I've just visualized them or imagined them and just sat there with that. One of the things that I experience every morning is I just ask and visualize, what's the ceremony that my ancestors want me to participate in with them this morning? If I can just sit here with my eyes closed, and, you know, sometimes it's like cosmic, you know, they're like literally washing me with stars. And I needed to visualize that on that particular day. And I'm just being open to the fact that there are ways that I can receive love that are beyond what I can just figure out or comprehend with my mind or literally find out through my research. I was saying to some students earlier today, I feel like it's like I research all I can, and then sometimes it's like, and then this is what they showed me. And I don't know, is Fadeke here? Wonderful scholar. Fadeke is creating a citation practice for that, for like ancestral messages, which is so cool. And I'm excited to read an article that she's published on that. Anyway, get in touch with me if you want more information about that. I don't think there's any one way. I think that it can be difficult. There are ancestors who I never got to meet. And since one of the ways I listen for ancestors is sometimes I repeat something that they said, like, what did Fannie Lou Hamer say? nobody's free until everybody's free. I do that with my own family members. I do that with other ancestors I want to connect with when there's something that they've said that I can reach to. But sometimes I don't know something that they've said, but maybe if I know one word in the language of where they were, there's music coming on, I don't know. Maybe if I know the name of one of their children and I imagine that they would have said that, I just say it. I think there's really infinite ways to connect, is what I'm saying, and that maybe you can trust what feels right to you, and then if you do it and you're like, that is not gonna be one of my practices, you just stop doing that and you try something else. That's a great question.
I think we have time for one more. One of the things our audience member says is that I appreciate about you, Alexis, is how you embrace all that you are in your work. What do June and Audre have to teach us about embracing allness?
Everything. This is why. These should be your teachers, like they are my teachers. I mean, it's not true that in every moment you can really transcend every single fear that you don't even know you have, you know? So I think we have to have compassion for ourselves and even for our ancestors in that way. Writing this biography, thinking about some times where Audre Lorde didn't say what she wanted to say. She was a person who, I do this when I'm sitting there meditating, I'm like, that's what I should have said. Or why didn't I do this? Or why didn't I tell this person, you know, how I really felt? And, you know, reading Black feminist journals, you see a lot of that, of like, oh, what does it mean that I didn't say this or I did say this? So I don't want to say that these people were just acting out their full truth, even though they were teaching us to do that with their lives, that they felt that they were living up to that in every moment. And so maybe that's one of those things, you know, to have compassion with ourselves. I think that I wouldn't be able to bring myself to my work if I wasn't also able to just really have compassion. And there's a journal entry where Audre Lorde wrote, she wrote about this thing, I don't know if you can relate to it, where she knows she's a writer. She knows she's on the earth to write. She's known that since childhood. And she's like, okay, I know this, so why am I always finding everything else to do in the house instead of writing? And she was like 40 when she wrote that. And when I read that, I was like, oh, good. You know? Like the great Audre Lorde also procrastinated, but it didn't stop the love from flowing through, right? It didn't stop her from doing the work that I know I needed her to do and that I feel like we actually all need.
Alexis, two things. One, and maybe this is our closing. Mm-hmm. There was one thing that shocked me in the biography, and it was when you gave us her first funeral, and she was being honored, and how she talked about what she loved. And I think it goes back to June Jordan also, in a conversation talking about the importance of self-love. And you have mirrored this with one of your spiritual practices. And maybe you could end with that story on self-love and how we might take that with us so that we can truly embrace the power that is ours.
Oh yeah, so there's this great moment. It's the dedication of the Audre Lorde Women's Poetry Center at Hunter College. And Audre Lorde says, I love this event. It's about my three favorite things: poetry, women, and myself. And I'm so glad they recorded that, you know, and I could like hear her say that because they have that at the archive at Spelman. And yeah, maybe we could, this is also about, you know, be in a space that's about our favorite things. Maybe it's not always about us. The dedication of the Audre Lorde Women's Poetry Center is in a certain way about Audre Lorde. But also she was forever surrounding herself with her favorite things, even if those were rocks. Definitely women she was surrounding herself with, definitely poetry. And if we could trust that more, trust that more, even if we don't know quite like what is it going to be useful for, or how are other people going to validate and affirm that use. I think it's really important, and it's definitely something that both Audre Lorde and June Jordan model, and Fannie Lou Hamer model in ways that, as I said, I'm still growing into.
And I love that you are leaving us, I know I'm leaving with the idea of how do we, each of us in this moment in time, create our own force field of love that then can be shared in the community that we create. Thank you so much, Alexis, and thank you to all of you.
Well, in closing, I want to say thank you so much to Alexis Pauline Gumbs and Tempest Williams for saying yes to Harvard Radcliffe Institute today, and for your insightful remarks. And I want to say thanks to all of you for being here, for being such a warm and responsive audience. We hope to see you again here soon, and have a good evening.